Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to all of you present here. Today we have all gathered over here for a dialogue with the world university leaders from Cambridge to Hong Kong. May I please welcome Sir Leszek, Vice-Chancellor of Cambridge University, and Professor Lap-Chee, Vice-Chancellor Hong Kong U. Since we are the moderators of the ceremony, may I briefly run you down through the rundown. We have 20 minutes of a dialogue with the world university leaders, and after that we have 15 or 20 minutes open to the floor for the Q&A session. So may you please save your questions for the very end. Hello everyone, I am Kshitij Tiwari from India, and I am Year 1 student Electronics and Communication Engineering in Hong Kong U.
And good afternoon, I'm Alyson, I'm from Beijing, and now it's my second year in accounting and finance.
Good afternoon, I'm Sam, and I'm from Hong Kong, and I'm studying LLB Bachelor of Laws Year 1 as well. So now we will invite Professor Tsui, Vice-Chancellor of the University of Hong Kong, to deliver a welcoming speech. Professor Tsui, please.
This is only a formal part of the proceedings. Distinguished guests, colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by thanking you all for joining us this afternoon, and I welcome you to this dialogue with world university leaders. I'm sure this refers to Sir Leszek. And this is a great honor and privilege for Hong Kong U to have Professor Sir Leszek Borysiewicz, the 345th Vice-Chancellor of the University of Cambridge, with us this afternoon to speak to our students, colleagues, alumni, and friends as part of our centennial celebration. Boris, as Sir Leszek is known to all his colleagues and friends, was Chief Executive of the UK's Medical Research Council from 2007. And from 2001 to 2007, he was at Imperial College London, where he served as a principal of the Faculty of Medicine, and later as deputy rector. And as deputy rector of Imperial College, Boris was responsible for the overall academic and scientific direction of the institution, particularly in the development of interdisciplinary research between engineering, physical sciences, and biomedicine. Boris served as the governor of the Wellcome Trust from 2006 to 2007, and was elected as Fellow of Royal Society in 2008 for his work on vaccine development, including work towards a vaccine to combat cervical cancer. He was also knighted in 2001 for his contribution to medical education and research. So Boris, a very warm welcome to Hong Kong U. Hong Kong U was the first university established here in Hong Kong back in 1911, and we admitted our first cohort of students in 1912. And we, of course, are very young indeed when compared to Cambridge with its over 800 years of glorious history. But Hong Kong U has stood for the importance of knowledge and education in transforming individual lives, building communities, and serving society in the past, in this part of the world, in the past 100 years. Indeed, at the heart of our centennial celebrations are the values, knowledge, heritage, and service. And as the university begins its second century, these are the values we will all continue to uphold. We are honored that distinguished scholars, Nobel, and other laureates and leaders from around the world have been joining us as part of centenary celebrations. And the insight brought to us by these renowned scholars and world leaders, such as our distinguished guests today, will greatly benefit the university community and the public at large. These events are, in fact, a reminder of the knowledge, heritage, and service that Hong Kong U continues to stand for. In fact, today at Hong Kong U, we have placed a lot of emphasis on student-centered learning, and that is holistic, experiential, and not necessarily bound to the classrooms. And this afternoon's dialogue epitomizes our education aims, because today's discussion between Boris and myself will be guided by three student moderators. They are Alyson, Kshitij, and Sam. I haven't met them before until this afternoon. They're from very different cultural backgrounds, as they introduced themselves earlier. They actually study in very different programs. And actually I have absolutely no idea what they can do guide us through this afternoon. So I think So I'm sure both Boris and myself will be totally inspired by the viewpoints, even challenged by their questions. From our response, Lap-Chee would be able to compare and contrast two institutions of higher learning, Cambridge and Hong Kong U, one over 800 years, as I said earlier, and the other just 100 years young, to see if we share any similarities in the ideals and relevance of education or university education in this 21st century. Now, I hope you also participate in a dialogue yourself and let us have your views about the purpose and mission of a university and our approach to learning or teaching and learning. Now, enjoy this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Professor Tsui. Now let's welcome Professor Sir Leszek, the Vice-Chancellor from University of Cambridge, to give us a speech.
Professor Tsui, academic colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real privilege and pleasure to be here today. And I'm going to kick off by just saying congratulations, and I suspect happy birthday would be in keeping. 100 years is a long time, and it's a good age to be. Remember, it's bigger than the memory of any single individual who's likely to be alive. Now, as a biologist, I think we sort of been increasing in age over many years, but 100 is still quite an achievement. And that means that the university at Hong Kong is charged very often with being a repository of knowledge. And therefore, at 100 years, the university has achieved something very special. It has transferred knowledge from one generation to the next. And that's why 100 years really matters. The second thing is that those of you like Kshitij and myself who actually enjoy the game of cricket know that once you scored 100, you actually try and make it 200. And there's a particular Indian cricketer that I know we both admire who actually goes on to do that with regular monotony, particularly against England. So overall, congratulations, a great achievement. And I do hope the Queen sends you a telegram as well, which is the normal thing that happens in the United Kingdom. So in commencing this discussion, I'd just like to think about what is it that makes great universities such as Hong Kong University and Cambridge great? What is it about the formula that makes universities like these two stand out? And I'm going to come down to a view, it comes down to the three things we all do, which is education, the development of new knowledge, and our interaction with society. Now, these may not be everyone's favorite topics, but I think these are three that I'd like to just pose to you. Firstly, let's just consider education. I personally believe that education has to be the heart of a university, and yet it's not always the one that's reflected with great prominence in those league tables that we all hate to look at, like to look at them when we're top, not so happy when we're bottom, and we like to be able to be very critical of them. But for Hong Kong and for Cambridge, believe me, it's a lot easier to be critical if you're near the top than if you're at the bottom looking down. So we are successful in those terms, and that, I believe, gives us the authority to say they don't fully reflect the importance of education in an institution, because this is very difficult to measure, and it's a very long-term investment that universities have to put forward. This educational component is different from university to university. And again, you may disagree with me, but I believe the diversity in global universities and the way we approach this is very important and is something to be valued, not something to be criticized. So in Cambridge, we have a collegiate university. We have a university which I'm Vice-Chancellor of, that consists of the departments, the schools, the faculties, provides the facilities, enables the research, sets the educational curriculum, and examines at the end of the day. That's why all students hate us. The colleges, well, they're the nice cuddly bits of the university. They're small, they're very nice, they have masters, mistresses, provosts, and we have one in the audience today, so they'll tell you just how nice the colleges are. You are admitted to the university through the colleges, not through the university, and the colleges are mixes of small groups of students across all disciplines, coming from all geographical backgrounds, to enable that real mixing of activity to occur. The university does the formal teaching. The colleges provide the supervision that provides that unique blend of the supervisory system that is so important to the Cambridge education. And that education means that in the colleges, the students and the staff mix, intermingle, they talk to each other, they forge ideas, and they forge ideas across the disciplinary boundaries, which in many institutions are cemented in the silos of the departments they would find themselves in. And that's why the university, despite all of the issues and problems and costs of this system, has reaffirmed in December that it will continue to remain a collegiate-based system, because we really believe that what this delivers is something very special. The other special thing is to remember that those students that we educate become the alumni of tomorrow. We're very blessed, for example, in Hong Kong, that we have 1,600 alumni. They are as much part of the university. This is Cambridge is their university. Hong Kong alumni in Cambridge belong to an alumnus association. They consider themselves alumni of Hong Kong University. Every university must remember that they are the best ambassadors any university could hope for. So the bottom line is give your students a good time, and they will actually repay that good time in spades as time goes forward. That doesn't mean to say we hand out great degrees. You have to earn them. So secondly, let's move on to the development of new knowledge, or how I would put it, future-proofing the world. Now, historically, we're a repository of knowledge, and some repositories of knowledge have come and gone. Remember where the British university system has come from. It has come from a monastic tradition. It actually came from a church and monastic tradition. And that meant that you basically held the information in yourself, and you held it for all eternity. Now, how much dissemination you did was really up to you, but many orders were closed. And some were pretty unsuccessful. I don't know how many of you here study Byzantine history, but there was a particular repository of knowledge from a group called the Stylites. The Stylites, particularly headed by St. Simeon, were a religious group but were particularly prominent in the 5th century AD, usually in Syria. Now, these individuals held an awful lot of knowledge, but how they decided to preserve that knowledge was to build a great big pillar in the desert, just like the ones holding up the roof here, and then they'd stand on top of it. And their view was that they were getting closer to the deity in which they believed, and therefore were getting more knowledge. The problem was, it was a bit of a self-seeking enterprise, because none of that knowledge was coming down from the top of the pillar. And it failed really on 2 counts, as far as I'm concerned. The first was that it's one thing standing on top of a pillar in Syria. When they tried this in Northern Europe and the winters came in, it was a different matter. It got very cold on top of a pillar, and you didn't survive very long. And the second thing was they'd lost contact with the societies that they were really trying to serve. So universities have to embrace change. We don't just become sterile repositories of knowledge. It is our responsibility to pass that knowledge on through students. It is also our responsibility to develop new knowledge. And I believe that research is an integral part. I further believe that research has to go hand in glove with the educational processes. So, how do we conduct research? There are 2 directions. One is the freedom of individuals to conduct individual programs, the so-called academic freedom approach. Come to Cambridge because you can study what you like with a little proviso from a Vice-Chancellor, so long as you get some funding to support it. This form of academic freedom is vital, because this type of research is where the Nobel Prizes grow. We've been very fortunate as Cambridge. We've got 89 Nobel Prizes now. Last one last year for in vitro fertilization. That's a fantastic achievement. But the real achievement of Cambridge is they've come from everywhere, from economics all the way through medicine, physical sciences, across all disciplines, because we've promoted the idea of individuals pursuing what really interests them in the academic domain. And that freedom is very, very important. For Vice-Chancellors, it's important because it attracts staff. It makes them feel they're really wanted and able to deliver. For the individual academic, it makes them feel valued, and it makes them feel that while we don't pay them very much for what they do, at least they're able to pursue what they want to pursue. Unfortunately, I have recently come from a world of funders, and the world of funders is changing dramatically. Funders increasingly want answers to what they perceive of as global problems, and they feel that this system of individual freedom is far too slow to get the answers they want. And therefore, we get to a global challenges situation where they want to impose the themes on the scientists, on the investigators, on those in the arts and humanities. The truth is to move further in this area means we have to achieve a balance in order to achieve the pragmatic solutions of real solutions for world problems at the same time as allowing academic freedom to occur. My last point is really around interaction with society. I gave you an example of what happens when you stand on top of a pillar and actually feel you can be outside the world and not engage with it. Remember all the time that it's society that provides and enables, grants in fact, the ability for academics to pursue their interests. It is society that empowers us and gives us the freedoms in which academics can thrive. But we need to ensure that we reciprocate that and return back to society where we can. I also believe there is no conflict here between academic freedom nor the aspirations of society. But how do we do it? Well, firstly, I think we provide, through the education system, the long-lived approach for the values that we cherish. In education, we educate. Yes, we do a bit of training for specific domains such as medicine or law or elsewhere, but above all, we have to educate. And by that I mean, I don't know what a doctor is going to be doing as a clinician in 40 years' time. I will struggle to tell you what a lawyer might be doing in 30 to 40 years' time. That is, Sam, except making money. The truth is we can't predict. What we have to instill in the university is the value of an education to know how to do it when you've long forgotten what it is that you've set about trying to learn. Secondly, we instill that spirit of discovery. Lastly, I want to turn to the research question, this balance between top-down and bottom-up. I come from a particular discipline where I certainly believe what is often apocryphally ascribed to Sidney Brenner. There is no such thing as blue skies research. It's either applied research or, frankly, not yet applied research. It's just we don't know when the yet might actually be in that particular domain. And I don't care whether that is from the humanities or other domains. All of these will enrich our lives in due course. We just do not know the timescale on which this is embarking. And lastly, when we discover something, whether it be in the arts or the humanities or in medicine, there is a responsibility on us to bring this to the attention of society at large and to exploit it if it's possible. That might mean so-called unholy alliances with industry, or it might mean alliances with government. It might mean other ways in which we get that information across, sometimes even making society very cross with us as academics because we believe in something that we have to stand up for. Those are values that ultimately will set universities apart, and they will be seen by society at large to have really helped. So, finishing off, congratulations on reaching 100 years. And in Polish, we have a saying, 100 years more, 100 lat nawzajem. Hong Kong and Cambridge are great institutions, but we can never afford to look backwards. There is no resting on your laurels in the competitive world of higher education. Both, I'm sure, Professor Tsui and I have got only one direction. We have got torticollis, a clinical condition of the neck where you get neck stiffness. We only look in one direction, and that's actually forward. We can't keep looking over our shoulders, nor can any academic alive today. We're only as good as our current research, and we're only going to get better by the work that we do tomorrow and the students we train for tomorrow. We have to embrace change and innovation, and we have to remain relevant to the society as it is today and as society changes for tomorrow. Thank you.
We are now going to start the dialogue with the Vice-Chancellors. So, sir, like I just promised, I won't give you much of a hard time, but I would like to take the privilege to start. I would like to ask you the question about the very beginning of our university life. How do you suggest the transition from a high school to entering a college? There's a huge gap between the two. How do you suggest we should do things to cover up the gap? Like not to get a huge shock all of a sudden.
Yes, good question, and one which I think every student has faced at some point in their lives. The real issue here is about ensuring that the transition is made in the knowledge of what your future life at the university is going to hold. So what helps? I think summer schools help in order to make sure that you're prepared in advance for what's there. Secondly, that you've been to visit the place so you actually know where you're going to be. You've talked to other students. Now, you also have a supervisor that enables you to cope with difficulties when they arise. You see this often when international students come to Britain. It's difficult to settle in. You're settling into a different culture at times. You've got to find your feet. What I will argue is that the Cambridge system, and for that matter for our friends in Oxford as well, is ideally suited to enabling you to encounter these particular areas. But the main thing for the student is to ask for help. Where I've seen real problems occurring is where the student bottles it all up in themselves, thinks it's rather demeaning to ask people for help. Bottom line is every academic's been there, done it, and got the T-shirt. What they all know is how difficult that transition can be. The most difficult is the student who actually sort of stows himself away, hides away, and thinks it'll all be all right tomorrow, and doesn't come along and say, look, I've got real problems, I don't understand this visa issue. And we don't want to get the problems when you suddenly find the visa's run out or it's not working well. Share problems, discuss them with other students, and ensure that you enter into the spirit of the community of the university. The problems tend to occur with the loners who don't want to get into that engaged community, and it's one reason why I believe in the collegiate system there's less chance of the hiding place for those individuals. So that would be my solution to you.
Professor Choi, would you like to add on to this about how things work for Hong Kong U?
Well, very much the same. But I see that the problems becomes more serious when the world is become more digital, if I put it that way, and then the students actually know a lot more, but then they rely too much on the digital information and forget about the human side of contact. And therefore, in high school, you learn from a teacher in the usual setting, and then you do your examination, and you're lucky to get to the university, and then a university is a different life. If you just say in the classroom, following the teachers and take notes, and that's high school. That's not university education. As I was saying earlier, that the university education is not just in the classroom. You come out and interact with your classmates in the hall. I see that the Oxbridge system, the college system, actually a lot of interaction with the tutors and then the other activities. In fact, I know that in Cambridge you only have 8 weeks for a semester. It's great, a lot of time for interaction. And therefore, I think the key here is actually students are not prepared to take own actions, and they don't know how to lead their own life. I think, of course, your tutor system helped them a lot. And then Hong Kong, I think we're changing our education system, particularly for local students. We have a 5+2. And 3, the university. Now we have the so-called 3-3-4. And then students may not get used to this kind of sudden change. And then so I see that we need more and more services, counseling services of all types. And then, of course, our teachers are learning too. We do have a college system, but not as elaborate at Cambridge. And so I think we try our best to help. But the students have to reach out and help yourself.
Thank you, sirs. Followed by Kshitij's question, I got another question. We know that to make the students adjust to university life, they gotta somehow agree with the university mission, value, or cultures, and how to nurture the students to fit in the cultures or values in 3 years of university life.
You want me to try first? The first day I arrived on Hong Kong U, I got actually called to a university hall. This is a residential hall at Hong Kong U. And then I was asked the toughest question is that you being a new Vice-Chancellor of this university, do you know the Hong Kong U culture? Do you know our U-Hall culture? I said, well, cultures can change. Our thinking can change over time. And I think actually you are the people supposed to educate me. And then you want the university to keep on your U-Hall culture. You want the Hong Kong U culture passed on one from generation to another. You're the ones who carry the culture. So I see that the culture and the environment of a university is not just a single person's job, but it's a collective activity. Functions like this, dialogues like this, I think we learn from each other. And I look forward to hearing from you more.
Well, for me, you learn after a bit to be able to recite mission statements till the cows come home. The truth is, they're only as meaningful as bits of paper. The real issue is what is the culture and value of an institution. And culture and values are much more permanent than the ephemera that usually surround making a politically correct statement. It is about imbuing people with the culture and value. It is about the fact that people coming to an institution understand what that is before they actually come to the institution. For us, that culture is about the education of the individual. It is about the promotion of individual academic freedom. The academics can be critical, but it's also about respect for others and opinions of others in relationship to that totality, and that thirst and hungriness in order to pursue the boundaries of knowledge. But to do so also in the context of the benefit to society. And I think that benefit to society is the bit that's often too easily forgotten, that we don't live in a vacuum, we actually live in a pragmatic world, and those are things that I think really work. Oh, there will be disagreements. I mean, every Vice-Chancellor at some point faces issues where people will demonstrate, will have opposite views. I respect their right to demonstrate and respect their right to have those views, and I respect their right that I listen to those views. I don't necessarily have to agree with them, and it's that balance of ensuring that there is a respect for different people's position in this area is something that it goes to the heart of growing up and goes to the heart of becoming a well-educated, well-rounded individual.
Yeah, I fully agree with what Boris said earlier. In fact, when he was talking about what the world-class institution is about research, about teaching and learning, education, that's what you said, and about the returning your knowledge to society, and we call it knowledge exchange. In fact, this is in our strategic development plan recently. And then I think all institutions are into the same three sort of legs, and it's how you do it. I think, therefore, the culture of the institution is very important. It's not something you can buy. You can always write these statements. We want to be the world-class institution with all these things. But then how you do it, it's not something that you can teach and then next day you'll be able to do it. And therefore, I think tradition is very important. 800 history, I think something you cannot replace. And all the knowledge you have in there is just the culture of Cambridge. And then I'm glad that Hong Kong U has developed similar culture of excellence. And then in these three areas, although the so-called knowledge exchange is still a very new area, sometimes controversial, as Boris said.
Thank you so much. Now, I actually have another question about the history and culture, because actually both universities have a long history and a rich culture. So do you think having such a long history itself is somewhat a burden to the transformation of the university itself, or it actually shapes its character as well?
Well, I'll let Boris go first, because 8 times more history than Hong Kong.
The answer is history does shape culture. I actually believe that generally it shapes culture of countries as much as it shapes culture of universities. But within it, you come to certain values that history allows the time to elapse for you to shape and sharpen those values so you know what you stand for. If you asked me and challenged me and said, well, that's all fine words, well, in essence, what is it that Cambridge stands for? And the answer is quality and excellence in everything that we do. There is no compromise. And I'm sure HKU and just about probably every global university will be saying exactly the same. What we've got to ensure is we do not drop standards. There are many pressures which are often external to institutions that actually try to push for a change in those, oh, we just veer a bit this way, veer a bit that way. But at its heart, there is no substitute for the quality of what we do, alongside that capacity to engage in that freedom of debate and discussion that we all enjoy. So yes, the answer is, I think history has helped. It also helps actually when you get into discussion with politicians, because you can say to them, you're only here for 4 years, we've been around for 800, so we know who's going to win in the longer term.
There you go, exactly the same. 1/8 shorter. Absolutely, this, I think this kind of value in the institution has to be really, like I said earlier, takes time to develop. Even though the university at the very beginning, I say that perhaps the student population was not the same, but the teacher population, well, perhaps is not the same either, because from the very beginning, we recruit globally. In fact, I was telling Sir Leszek earlier that we use the Association Commonwealth Universities to help us recruit the best teachers available at that time, and that was 100 years ago. Not yet. They are only 98 years, right? So, but before the Hong Kong has the UGC and so on, and then our own recruitment system, we rely very much on the ACU, of course, to recruit the best teacher at the time. So many of our teachers sitting here, they were probably interviewed and recruited by colleagues at that time in Cambridge to come to Hong Kong. So I think the Hong Kong U definitely benefited a lot from this help from the universities in UK, and that's why we treasure this history, and then this is part of our history, and that's why when ACU wanted to come to Hong Kong to have a meeting, I said, yes, very much welcome that, because we benefited from the system. And then Hong Kong U, because of the history that we had, and so we, just like Cambridge, we've tried to follow Cambridge, and then in a lot of ways. And excellence is definitely one of the ways that we follow religiously.
Thank you, sir. Since it's mentioned that high quality and the diversity is really important for the development of a university, then I want to ask, like, it's embarrassing to say, but we need money to achieve that. So I know that UK, the tuition fees actually tripled to £9,000. So how do you think about this change? And then also, $9,000 can actually be a barrier to a lot of international students. And so, what is the conflict between these two? I want to know your opinions on this issue.
So I suppose the question's for you.
Yeah. Well, it's been a colourful debate in the UK over this issue. First, you've got to understand the context, I think, of what is going on here in the United Kingdom, and why universities feel in some way that this debate has not really been fully engaged. As a council of the university, we made statements very clearly that we object to any reduction in funding for higher education, because we believe that that is the best investment a country can make, and therefore we do not support a reduction in this funding. What the government has done is to take 80% of the teaching budget away for what used to come from central government, and they have transferred this, if you like, into a system whereby students will be paying directly for their education. The government, in its beneficence, has decided that what it will do is it will enable you to borrow that money and then tell you you don't have to repay it back until you're earning a reasonable salary. Now, all of that is fine, and when you add up the sums, you will actually very quickly come to the conclusion you're still getting a pretty good deal, and at £9,000 deferred for a longer period of time at RPI plus 3% is actually a pretty smart deal and a lot better than any institution you would be looking at from the Ivy League or elsewhere in the United States. There is, however, a problem which I think it goes to the heart of this, is do we really believe that the total benefit of a higher education is to the individual? I've actually talked already about the importance of the benefit of higher education and of those individuals' contribution to society. The challenge I've often thrown to prime ministerial teams and elsewhere, isn't the country benefiting from the fact that you went to university and you're now in positions of leadership and authority, and therefore shouldn't society be providing some of that support to individuals? Now, do I believe that therefore we shouldn't be charging fees? Well, if I did that, I'm afraid I have to be pragmatic. We have an institution to run, and we have to maintain that quality and excellence. And if we don't charge those fees, frankly, we will not be able to deliver the quality of education that we have to. So in a pragmatic sense, we have to take this particular stance. But that debate has not taken place in the UK, and it is one that is, I think, the reason why you read so much about this in the newspapers and elsewhere. As a prediction, I think this will go through, I think it will continue, and it will change the nature of higher education. I suspect it will make students actually much more choosy as to what we provide, because they will see themselves increasingly as people who are very much paying for the education that they're receiving. There are downsides to this approach, and the two that concerns me are particularly those who can least afford it. We all know IQ, those of us who are in biology know that IQ is normally distributed. That is, if you walk anywhere in the city, you will find a normal distribution of IQ. Some very bright kids, some not so bright kids. Money should not make a difference. For Cambridge, it is vital we attract the very brightest children who can best benefit from what Cambridge has to offer. Unfortunately, some of those in the poorer sectors might be put off by that fee of £9,000. And that means that through the colleges, we'll be redoubling our efforts to make sure that they are not put off. And we are therefore putting up our bursaries, just like American institutions do, that if you cannot afford it, we're going to do our best, if you're good enough, to make sure that it's as affordable as any other university course for you. The second is a personal anxiety. And it's an anxiety not about first choice of degrees, but it is if we start equating a university education to a utilitarian goal. In other words, I do business studies because that's going to get me a great job in accounting or finance later on. It may be a great motivation, and that's fine. And therefore, quite quickly, you'll be able to do in your accountancy experience and work out that £9,000, well, no contest, a good investment for life. Would the same be said of somebody who wants to study ancient Assyrian as a language? Where's going to be the financial benefit? Will they be prepared to take on a higher degree in that area, knowing full well the debts have actually been incurred? And I am worried about these very specialized subjects. Will we still be able to attract, in the longer term, students who will be looking to get back to paying back their dues in the long term? That's a long-term issue. I don't think we're going to see the results of that for 5 to 7 years. But we have to watch that very, very carefully. Otherwise, we could get a skewing of the subject choices within a university. And therefore, for universities like Cambridge, which thrive on the breadth of academic experience that we've got, that is a potential threat, and one which I do worry about. It's an unforeseen threat, and I hope it never comes about. But I believe it's quite a real one looking downstream.
Thank you, sir, for answering and throwing some light on the financial front of working with universities in UK. And since we are running out of time for the very first section of the dialogue, I would pose the very last question for you. What exactly does it take for Cambridge to be a world leader?
Our core values. It's the unchanging and unfailing commitment that whatever we do, imbued in all our staff and our students, is we always do our best, and we will always work to the highest possible standards of quality, measured on an international scale. I'm not interested in national measurements or in subject-specific measurements. I'm interested in how well we're actually doing. And I'm also interested in how well the students and the alumni think that we are doing, because they are also providing us the longitudinal reassessment of those areas. And I think every global university is always looking for that sort of feedback. The comparisons that we're making now between HKU and Singapore, because we can always learn from others. So the third element of it is change and be prepared to change. And if you want to live 800 years, I think you've got to keep evolving. You cannot stand still like the dinosaurs did when the meteor hit. You know, you will gradually find yourself to have got so big and so inflated with your own views that you've stopped looking forward and you've stopped looking to that capacity to evolve and adapt.
With this, we come to an end of our very first section of the dialogue, and may I now please invite the audience to ask their questions, if any. And may I please also tell you that since we are running out of time, we just have 2 or 3 questions for you to ask. Thank you.
Please, the gentleman back there.
Dear Vice-Chancellors, thank you very much for an interesting presentation. I'm a graduate from Hong Kong U, and I would like to have a question about the style of education system in Hong Kong. Hong Kong used to be the British colony, and we follow the UK education system. And I'm sure the long history and the success of Cambridge have proven the success of the UK education system. Nevertheless, in the past few years, it seems that in some university in Hong Kong, they follow the American-style education system. And for example, in Singapore, and the university also pay more attention to the American journals for their research publications. Do you think this is a global trend? And may I also know your views on this, or what are the implications? Thank you.
I suppose this question is for me first, because you talk about the Hong Kong sort of university system, or Hong Kong higher education system. Yes, so we benefited a lot from the UK model, as I mentioned earlier. And but I think we also see that from the high school level, therefore the education reform in Hong Kong, the so-called from the 5+2+3 switch to 3, 3, and 4. It's not just about the university education reform; it's about whole education reform. I think more so at the lower level than at the higher level, because the 5+2 they thought that it was too specialized, streaming too early, and then the youngsters, the students who are leaving high schools may not have all the knowledge they need to have for the future, for how to make a living in the future. Therefore, it's really from 3+3. And then 4 is that it happens to be the number of years that American university spans for the university, but you can say there's also in the mainland. So whether I want to become more Americanized or more Chinese, you cannot say. I think it's just because of the whole system we're looking at is part of the whole reform. It's not just one sector or one segment. Then whether or not the research journal problem, I hope that the Boris can comment on that, because he sits on the research, the assessment exercise for the past some years before he became the Vice-Chancellor of Cambridge. So that whether or not it's American journals are taking the lead, actually a lot of journals are European or UK journals. So I would say research is not really driven by one country, it's actually an international thing. But the journals, the publishers, do control the so-called popularity, because subscription and so on. Therefore, more and more academics are now pushing for these open journals, so that no publishers required, and then you can, of course, as peer review is still required, and so on. But since in terms of new knowledge, there's no such thing as Asian new knowledge or American new knowledge or European new knowledge. Therefore, it's only one standard. And we know that the West is actually leading in many of the areas in scientific research. And therefore, you see that a lot of journals publish all papers or styles in the West. But then you look at the authors. On the other hand, you know the authors, many of them are Asian or Chinese authors. So therefore, I think it's just the world is following actually we're chasing the frontiers. We're at the front end, and then so that is the way it is going. Not necessarily we're following the American-style journals at this time. So it's my interpretation, perhaps, Boris, you have a different view.
Not really. I think firstly about education systems. If there was a perfect education system, the whole world would have adopted it by now. So you have to understand that there is no perfect education system. We all strive, and they will always change until we're all searching for the perfection to allow individuals to achieve the best that they can within the education system. So whether it's 3 + 3 and then 4 at university, or 5 + 2 + 3, let me just give you some disadvantages of the UK system. We specialize very early. The reason we can go to 3 years at university, because through the system in Britain, we already have subspecialized in the 2 years within school. That's got its strengths. It also has its weaknesses in terms of the breadth of coverage. You know, recently in 2002, there was a removal of the requirement for a second language, even to enter a university such as Cambridge. That's had a devastating impact on teaching of modern languages in our secondary schools. You know, these are all untoward consequences. Therefore, every country will be looking and striving to improve its system. In terms of the dynamic, please remember that the UK dynamic is betwixt and between. We're very much in awe, and a bit maybe like China and elsewhere, of the North American system, because we believe that what North America does is actually very good and produces high quality results at the end of the day. However, we're also right next door to Europe. And the European system is much more driven towards a broad baccalaureate-based approach in terms of its outcome from higher education, and is driven to, in the university system, to 3 years of undergraduate, 2 years of masters, and 3 years for PhD study. Britain doesn't agree with that because it likes sort of 4 + 1 + 3 or 3 + 1 + 4, but in a typical way we will disagree with Europe. In other words, there are about as many permutations of education systems in terms of years of study as you could hope to make. So no system is perfect. I think it is right for authorities to look to improve the system all the time. Will the system you've just chosen be the ultimate system? I'm willing to bet you 10 Hong Kong dollars it'll change again in the next few years. But we have to look at that change in a positive way, not in a negative way, to see if we can learn from it and allow that system to evolve. And similarly for journals. I mean, the bottom line, it so happens Macmillan journals at the moment seem to dominate the pile because they're read by so many more people. Elsevier would like to be there. We're talking about commercial battles between journal companies. Let me again give you a prediction. 10 years' time, there may be none of these publishers actually around. Electronic publishing and publishing through your own institution may well have taken over. There may not even be peer review of journals. It may well be buyer beware. You read what you like and you draw your own conclusions. You know, we have to face that there may be a different world in 10 years' time. So I don't believe there is an American model. If Chinese science continues to grow at the rate it is at the moment, in terms of numbers of publications, it will overtake America in 5 to 7 years. I mean, will Elsevier actually be a Chinese publisher by then? I mean, certainly I can tell you Cambridge University Press has got some very well-established offices in China already. So, you know, we do not know, and there isn't a national emphasis on this. It's the global one in the search of the eternal truths that universities and academics strive for at all times.
Thank you very much. Due to the time limit, we're going to have the very last question. Are there anyone from Cambridge University that will like... Okay, then we'll just come to the last question. Okay, gentleman here.
I'm actually from Cambridge University. I'm an undergrad studying in Cambridge from Downing. Actually, we talked about the bursary system in Cambridge. You mentioned that there might be a bursary rise due to the fee cuts, well, the fee rise proposed by the government. However, why was it the case that there was originally 3,600 something pounds for bursaries? You suggested to put it down to 1,000 and something, and now after the massive demonstration that we put up by Tsui, that you remain it, that we can boast about. We save bursaries. Thank you. Sorry.
Fair question. Actually, it goes back to the debate and discussion. In fact, if you look at Tsui submitted papers, which Council looked at and didn't comment before, and the Tsui papers helped to formulate the debate of Council. There was no particular stated position. It was a working group paper that was published beforehand. The importance for Cambridge is that we have decided to commit close to £11 million in bursaries in the forthcoming year. And as always in an academic institution, through discussion and debate, I feel we've got to a position which is the right position for the university to be in. It's affordable, and it actually increases slightly the opportunity for students to engage this area. But we did something else that was very important. The debate, you remember, centered very much on whether we provided fee waivers or we allowed students to use the money for their maintenance and support. And you know, as a student, sometimes the fee waiver, you can borrow that money from government. It's the maintenance and support that's really important. And what we did was to make sure the student had the choice, not to have the choice imposed on them. And that, I think, is a very substantial and important change to make sure that the students are really able to choose how best to spend the money that we're able to give them in support. So do I feel that I am humbled by the students? No, I'm not. I feel I'm actually informed in the discussion and the way, the very adult way in which they actually brought that matter forward to the council for consideration. It was a good discussion, and I think a very good outcome.
Okay, anyone who is feeling really lucky and want to grab a chance to ask a very last bonus question?
Good day, Vice-Chancellor. My name is Tong, Eddie Tong. I'm a Hong Kong graduate of 1967, some 40 years ago. And I'm an architect by profession, now retired, leading a leisure life, doing a lot of volunteer work. My son is a Cambridge graduate, so I fit in pretty well for today's seminar, from Cambridge to Hong Kong, Hong Kong to Cambridge. We know Cambridge is running on colleges system, and we know the advantage of the colleges. As my first impression is that it costs more because I have to pay extra item college fee for my son. That's an addition. Hong Kong U is 100 years old. Compared to Cambridge, we are still pretty young. So, Professor Borysiewicz, what advice you can give to Professor Tsui that Hong Kong U may grow stronger, may grow better, and at the end of the time, we can truly be known as a world university. And of course, Professor Tsui, don't worry, I'm proud of being a Hong Kong U graduate. And for our guest, I'm sure my son is proud to be a Cantabrian. Thank you.
Well, thank you for those comments, and I'm delighted to be responding to somebody who has direct connections between the two of us, much as I hope that we'll be able to grow the connections between the two universities. The key element, you're right in what you said about the courses at Cambridge. They are expensive. To deliver them, in essence, is about £17,500 per year. So even the sums that we're asking for in terms of fees only cover 50% of the cost. The university begins to subsidize those costs for home and EU students, and unfortunately for international students, those are the reasons that for the cost. There is no profit being made from these. It's actually covering the cost of the tuition that we provide. It's a system that's, that has, as its major disadvantage, is that it is costly, but it's a system we believe that is worth the price at the end of the day. In terms of what advice I can give Hong Kong University, well, A, that's very presumptuous of one university to tell another, because we do have to maintain a diversity. But if I had to give Professor Zhu any advice, and he's been longer in the job than I have, it could only be stick to your values at the end of the day. If you stick to those through thick and thin, and there will be thick and there will be thin, then at the end of the day, maybe from some cloud in the future, he and I will be looking down at the 800th anniversary of Hong Kong University.
So thank you so much, Sir Leszek, for your comments. In fact, I was just about to say that 700 years, I think, will be world number one. But of course, 700 years later, right? So God knows how the university will become in the future. I was commenting at one time that the university, we are sharing more and more courses or exchange programs for students. And then we're sending students to different parts of the world for exchange, and in Cambridge of students here. And therefore, I think in the future, there will be more mobility of students. And then the 800 years or 700 years from now, there may be only 2 universities in the world. One is called Star Alliance, the other one is One World. And it's very much likely to happen, like in Europe, what do you call Bologna Accord, and then therefore they're already shaping up Europe. But as Boris said earlier, these things will change. But finally, I think when things all come together and with more student mobility, I think we all believe in students traveling abroad, studying abroad, have experience study abroad, and so on, because this will increase the competitiveness of our future generation. And if that happens more and more often, all universities are doing that, then it will become just like airlines. We'll be sharing credits or points and so on. And therefore, I mean, that is actually very good to be world peace.
I sincerely hope so. The big issue here is going to be whether the big top universities in the world become the multinationals, if you like, of the education world. The answer is maybe, but only if they earn the right to be there. And ultimately, it will be the students who will decide whether we've earned that right, because they will be deciding which university, just as you decided, your son, which university to go to. So we have to continue to deliver the quality and excellence of what we do in order to ensure that it is worth their while to come to these universities. And after that, I think we wait and see and sit on that cloud together somewhere in the future.
With this, we come to the end of our discussion session, and I would like to thank the 2 Vice-Chancellors for their valuable time and the sharing session. May we please have a huge round of applause for the 2 Vice-Chancellors, please. May I ask Professor Tsui to present a souvenir for Sir Leszek?
Could we also have a huge round of applause for the student?